So this is part 2 of why, I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness. I think this work is important, telling our stories, mainly because I know that as I was waking up, I didn't have a support system outside of these videos. And so when I first woke up, or started to wake up, my therapist told me, you need to write letters, you need to journal, all the things that, I would tell my clients to do on the crisis line. But this time it was different, right? Because I'm a crisis specialist at this point that's in a crisis. So, I got a chance to experience not just making suggestions to clients on how to handle their crisis of either waking up from being a Jehovah's Witness, or some of my clients, they just stayed in. They stayed in and they dealt with it, but it took an extreme toll on their emotional. And for me, I had no idea. You don't know until you actually go through it, right? And so I had no idea how it was going to impact my life. And to be honest, in my mind, I'm thinking it's probably not going to impact my life too much. But it did. And of course, you always want to remain hopeful. Everything's going to work out. So you have an option of either dealing with how it makes you feel physically and mentally by staying in, or you have an option of just telling your story and getting it out. So for me, during this wake up process, it wasn't an overnight thing, right? You'll find yourself physically in, mentally out, right? I found myself, initially I was physically in, mentally out. So what did that mean for me? It meant that going to the Kingdom Hall, doing all the things. At the time, I had a childhood friend who was a neighbor. And so, you're being hit with it a lot. And every time that person sees you, they're like, hey, let's get your study going again. So out of my love for Jehovah, I would get the study going again. And so it got to the point where I was being told by several sisters that, wow, why aren't you baptized yet? You could pretty much conduct the Bible study. I had enough knowledge, and I had been born and raised in it. And so I sat in plenty of studies. At one point, I used to teach after school. I used to teach PE in elementary. So I could put some things together, and I could actually teach, right? So it got to the point where they're like, you're so smart, why aren't you getting this? I'll never forget the words. They said, you're so smart, why aren't you getting this? And then that's when it dawned on me, I'm getting this, but it's not adding up. The math isn't mathing. There's nothing loving about it. And at the time, there's this thing when you're raised, a witness, it's kind of like you don't tell people what you went through, right? So here I am masking. I'm not explaining. I have childhood trauma. And, as much as I love God, it still comes back to, just even sitting in the Kingdom Hall, right? Sitting in the Kingdom Hall, and sometimes I would just get triggered just by certain things that they would say. And there was a time where certain things brought comfort to me, right? Like, you're going to see your daughter again. So, when I was 19 years old, I got pregnant. And it was out of wedlock, right? And so, my daughter, go through my pregnancy. My daughter passed away. Long story short, my daughter passes away. And at that moment, I feel like when you experience a death in your family, the death of a child in my case, because at this point, I really had never experienced no major loss. The only loss that I really remembered at that point, I would say, in my family was my dad's father, right? And so when I lost my daughter, it was a totally different experience. And a lot of people may not understand it, but I compare it to like heaven, right? A person says, you know, you're going to see your loved one in heaven again. Well, being a Jehovah's Witness, you know, you're going to see your loved one in paradise again, right? You're going to see this person here on earth. God's going to make this beautiful earth, and you're going to see your kid there. So I feel like they play a lot on it. Well, if you want to see your daughter again, this is what you need to do. So it was the same experience when I lost my grandfather and when I lost my grandmother, right? So at this point, as I'm waking up, I don't have my grandmother, who I was extremely close to. I don't have her to help me unpackage all these feelings, right? Me and my grandmother, you know, I told her everything. And so, you know, I didn't have her to go to say, hey, you know, this is what I'm dealing with, and have her listen and just guide me through that, or mainly listen. A lot of times it was her listening and just encouraging me to be positive about the situation. But I didn't have her this time. And so since I didn't have her this time, it was extremely hard to process all of that. And so what had happened was, you know, I'd go and I listened to the meetings on Zoom, and it just was not the same. It just wasn't the same feeling, right? It wasn't the same feeling anymore because you can't unsee it. You just can't unsee it. And at that point, you know, it kind of been like, I don't know, explain how to explain it. Maybe like the Wizard of Oz, right? Remember on the Wizard of Oz? So when I was growing up, the governing body, they weren't as visual, right? You knew who they were. There was no JW broadcast. You didn't get a chance to actually see it for your own two eyes. It was like an imagination thing. You had an idea of what it was like. But as the years went by and they came out with the broadcast, they're literally, you know, in your face. So at first, you know, you go through the exciting, oh, okay, this is awesome. I get a chance to actually see. But once I woke up and I saw the governing body from my own two eyes, it was a trigger for me because I'm looking at it and it's like, it reminded me of when I would be sitting there watching the broadcast. However, this time the words was different. So when I would be watching the broadcast, it would be like, you know, the governing body, you know, this is the new announcement. This is what we're doing. You know, we are God's one true organization. We're the only ones that are going to make it. And we are at the end of the end of the end, and we can see all the things that's going on in the world, so we need to get ourselves together. If you don't have yourself together, or there's an extreme push also for your loved ones, right? So it's kind of like a repeat of the same information every year. Is just recycled. And so you get these talks where, you get into your emotions. They definitely tap a lot into your emotions. And if you're like me, I'm extremely empathetic. And a lot of times people that experience childhood trauma are extremely empathetic. You feel it, right? You feel it. And so as you're sitting there, at this point, I'm tapping into, I want to see my daughter again. I want to see my grandmother again. I want to see, my grandfather again. I want to see my loved ones again. And the only way that I'm going to see them is to get baptized and to come to the hall and do all the things that I need to do. But I had already been doing that my entire life. And every time I get to the end, this little inner voice, my gut was like, if you do this and you decide that you don't want to do it anymore, you lose your whole family. And at this point, I didn't have much family left, right? At that point, I had my 2 uncles, 3 uncles at the time. And my mom and an aunt, right? So that's all I had. My dad's side of the family, I had pretty much lost all of them. And I had my uncle, my dad's brother, and I had a cousin who actually lived, in a whole other country. So at this point, the family is already dwindling down. And in my mind, I'm like, I really want to see these people again. But this is what I need to do. I cannot stress enough that once I needed to dig a little bit further. So the first time when I was watching the videos, I had to go back and watch it again because I had to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing, right? You go through this stage where you're like, okay, I better go get copies of the actual official documents because it's public record, right? Because you want to make sure this is a big decision. You're running the risk that when you walk away, you're not going to have your family again, right? Your mother's probably not going to speak to you again. Your father's not going to speak to you again. Your sister's not going to speak to you again. And my brothers, they weren't in it. So that was never a fear. But when it's your parents, it's scary, right? So as I'm going through this wake up process, I get this phone call and I find out that my uncle passed away. And this is my favorite uncle. My favorite. And I had never lost an uncle before. I was devastated. But before he died, I had talked to him probably a week before he died. And I told him, I said, we were talking about it. And I told him, I had stopped going. And he was like, good, because it's a cult. And this is my uncle that was extremely honest with me. And, I used to hear him say that before. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. It's not a cult. It's just different, right? So I told him, I had started going to church. And And then at this point, I had gotten baptized in church, right? That's for another video. But I told him everything, and we had a nice conversation. And it's just crazy because when I got the call and found out that he had died, I was so grateful. And I don't know if you guys ever experienced that, where you talk to a family member or a friend and you guys just have this deep conversation, and then when they pass away, you look back at that, you think about the conversation, and you're like, we were pretty much saying goodbye without knowing that we were saying goodbye, right? We were pretty much having this deep conversation of how his life was affected, once my grandfather became a Jehovah Witness, right? So when you are a witness, you are not allowed to do anything outside of the organization. And as a child, it's hard, right? As a child growing up in Compton, especially hard. Why? Because there's either drugs or there's the streets, which is all the streets, but getting into gangs, right? Getting into gangs or getting on drugs. You find something to get into, right? So for my uncle, it was the drugs. And so, he had been clean for several years. I was so excited. But we were able to really have a nice conversation and just talk about how the religion affects you. Now, as a kid, not being able to play sports because they suck up all of your time, right? So you got Tuesday night meeting, you got Thursday meeting, you got Saturday field service, you got Sunday going to the hall. And in the course of all this, you have to prepare for all of these meetings. So here I am, in school. I'm trying to get through my homework. I gotta do the watchtower. I gotta read whatever individual Bible studies. Then they added family study. Family study was hard. Family study is especially hard because you are not who you really are. Like you're really not expressing how you really feel, right? You're not sitting down with your kid talking about how was school, what happened at school, how was your day, is there anything you need from me? As I tell my kids, is there anything you need from me that you're dealing with? It's not like that. You're not sitting down with your kid tapping into their life and how they're feeling, right? So once again, you're sitting there and you're going over literature. So when my uncle passed away, it was a weird feeling. It was I miss him, but it was like, I'm not going back. I literally thought to myself, I'm glad that I woke up, because I know that if I had not woken up, then they definitely would have tried to use this death as a way to get me back in. And they did. I had some people, that were witnesses that reached out, and they did. And I had to have the conversation. And for the first time, I didn't go into no details, but I nicely said, I really appreciate you and your family. And I explained how, because at this point my therapist said, you need to let all this out, right? So I explained that I really appreciate your family being there for me when I was younger. It really helped because I was going through things, with my parents that I couldn't speak on. But going to the Kingdom Hall for me, to be honest, it's a trigger. It's a trigger for that childhood, right? And I got a chance to sit down, and tell this person some things that happened to me when I was a child. And after I got that off my chest and I was able to explain what I went through as a child, that person, I felt like that person heard me, but at the same time, it was the look of like, wow, I wish that would have never happened to you, because, it's affecting you coming to the Kingdom Hall. Not, I'm sorry that happened to you because you were a child, you were a teenager rather, and that should have never happened. Or you should have never been, in that back room with elders asking you inappropriate questions. Right? It was not that. It was, I'm sorry that this happened to you. Don't let that affect you serving Jehovah. And I wasn't as transparent, but at that time, I'm thinking about the governing body in that video where Jeffrey is like, he's asked, are you guys basically putting it out there that you are the one and only true organization that has a connection with God? And it's one of those moments, and I'm sure anybody who is listening to this video, if you've ever seen the Royal Commission on the Child Sexual Assault, you stop what you're doing, right? Because you got to remember, you're watching these videos, but you're watching them and you're actually scared when you're watching them, right? Because you're like, oh, I don't want to watch this because this might be apostate. And I don't want to be an apostate, because for me, I don't want to be an apostate because I don't want to disappoint God, right? I don't want to disappoint Jehovah. But when you're going to the assembly as a kid and you see these apostates, you're told, oh, they're mental, they're crazy, they're demonic, they got demons. So in your mind, you're like, okay, I want to watch this, but, I don't want to let no demons in my house. So I had to say a quick prayer, to be honest. I had to say a quick prayer, and I've said, Jehovah, I wanted to make sure I was praying to, I was using Jehovah's name. I wanted to make sure, so that way whatever got revealed to me, no one could convince me that it was Satan. Right? So I said, Jehovah, I don't want to do anything that's displeasing to you. But I need this closure. I need this closure. And this is a court trial. This is not me listening to someone who's an ex-Jehovah's Witness. This is me literally watching the governing body. So when they asked that question, he said, it would be a bit presumptuous for us to say that. And I still remember, like, for me, it was a smirk. For me, it was a smirk on his face. Some people might say it wasn't, but for me, it was. I saw a lightweight smirk, because deep inside, you do say that. You have said that. Nobody would be following if they did not believe that this was the one and only way to see their family again. If they didn't believe that you are the one, true voice of God. So at this point, when I hear him say that, I said, okay, now I need to watch and I need to hear some stories, right? Of ex-Jehovah Witnesses, their experiences they can't be any more demonic than what I just seen, right? So it really messed with me. It really messed with me that here I am watching the governing body, someone who I believe that, was put in place to be the mouth on earth of Jehovah, God, and you're saying that it's presumptuous to say that, but yet you've said it. As I watched this, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, I do plan on putting it in the link of the video. But as I watched this video or this trial, it amazed me that the judge had more empathy than the elders and the governing body. It was very clear that the governing body member that came to represent Jeffrey, he hadn't even been keeping up with it. He hadn't been watching it. I will give him grace and say, he did say at the time that he came in at the very end. So if you want to watch it, and I'm a court person. I love law. Always wanted to be a lawyer. Was robbed of that opportunity because I wasn't allowed to go to college. But as a child anyway, as an 18-year-old, and at this point, I'm not going back to law school at 47 because now you're allowed to go. Anyway, if you want to fast forward, you can just get to the last day, which I don't really suggest that because that's just the part with Jeffrey, but it's some deep stuff, right? And this is millions of dollars, donated dollars, that are going towards these lawsuits because millions of people, a lot of people are coming forward. There's a whole database. There's a whole database of people that are listed with child sexual assault. I had to take a pause right there. What is child sexual assault? Child sexual assault is an adult that is inappropriate with a minor. And the reason why I had to pause there, because I had to think about my judicial meetings when I was 16 years old. So when I was 16 years old, I was in judicial meetings. Because as I said in part 1, there's a grooming that happens when you're a Jehovah's Witness. When you get to the age of about, to be honest, you start seeing the grooming way before 16, but definitely the age around 15, you start seeing that there's this grooming, and then there's these conversations. So it's not like church where the kids are in one room having their topics, and there's this teen area, where the teens, they get to deal with their topics, and then there's the adults. When you are a Jehovah Witness, if you take your child to the Kingdom Hall, your child is sitting there listening to all the things. So if they decide to have if they decide to talk about sex before marriage, or I gotta watch what I say. Pleasuring yourself, right? I remember, I remember getting the first young people ads, and there was actually an article in there. And I remember you had to get permission. Your parent had to go up there and get the book with you. They had to give you permission. And I'm thinking, like, why would my parent have to go up there? Well, I discovered, because when I got the book, there was stuff in there dealing with teenagers, and their hormones, and make sure you're not doing certain things, if you know what I mean. There was, in hindsight, now that I think about it, there were just so many inappropriate conversations. And they present it as, we're helping you. But it really wasn't help, right? So getting back to the grooming, the reason why it hit me so hard, because I'm thinking in my mind, like, I'm in those files, right? I'm in those files. I was in those judicial meetings where I had elders, and I was 16 years old, and they're asking me inappropriate sexual questions. And now that I look back and I have a daughter, it's unbelievable, the questions that I was answered. I think the part that is the most unbelievable is the fact that I'm here in a judicial meeting. I'm not even baptized, but I'm in a judicial meeting, and my parents, they think that I'm in this back room just talking about things that were going on in our home. But that's not the conversation, right? The conversation is me being 16 years old and being groomed into with an older man in the congregation. And when I think about it, it's like, wow, I sat here and nobody was concerned with the fact that I was a minor. Nobody was concerned of my mental state, right? And so when we talk about the grooming, it goes back to a grown man dating a minor, right? And so my father, got married at 16. So I heard all the stories. My dad got married at 16. His wife was 14. They had their first baby. Me and my dad had a lot of similarities in our story. As far as we both had a baby that had passed away, our very first child that had passed away. And so I remember some of the stories that my dad had told me of what he had gone through getting married at 16. So as I'm pretty much in this judicial meeting, right, it's being presented to me that this situation has occurred, and at this point, you're less than, you've messed up, you pretty much, I don't know what word to use, but you gotta make this right. You had a grown man take advantage of you. You're a minor, and you have to make this right. And how do you make this right? You make this right by getting married. So no one talks about, the push for underage marriages. So the way child sexual assault are swept under the rug is you basically marry the person that did this to you. And in your mind, you're thinking, wow, there's a part of you that goes into, I disappointed God. You don't think in your mind, no, you were groomed. You were groomed and you were courted. Someone, courted you and you were a minor. And now that this has happened, you think, well, I'm no, who's gonna want me now? Everybody in the Kingdom Hall is gonna find out what happened. But I knew at 16, and just hearing the stories that my dad had told me, that there is just no way. And I thank God. I thank God that I did not fall into the trap of covering child sexual assault up by marrying the person that did that to you. If you marry the person, now in my father's case, it was just teenage love, right? He's 16, they're both minors. But there's a lot of young girls in the organization who are courted by grown men over the age, well over the age. And so something happens, in you. It changes who you are. You cannot get that back. You can't get that back. And so what happens is, they just try to convince you that, well, since it's happened, then you might as well just marry the person. And I can't even begin to explain. That was the one good thing that came out of that situation, was I was strong enough to say that, yes, me too, this happened to me, but I am not going to marry the person that did this to me. I'm not going to marry the person who was very aware that I was a minor at the time. And this is another thing that we don't talk about enough. When you're living in a home where there's domestic violence, and it happens a lot in the organization, right? You are dealing with things at home. And so it's very easy for you to meet a 20, 21-year-old, who is like, hey. And they start, trying to impress you. And you're looking at this person and you're like, you're very aware of your situation at home. And because at such a young age, they start grooming you to prepare you to get you married off at a young age. And you could only marry within the organization, right? And so, yeah, it hit a nerve because I'm thinking, I'm in those files. And how many other young girls are in those files. And in my case, I try to find the silver lining in it, right? So the silver lining in that case was, I wasn't a 6-year-old, right? A 7-year-old. I wasn't a young little girl where the CSA happened. I just was a teenager that was groomed. And there's a lot. As you start watching, I started watching those videos, and I might post some inside of my link. There's a lot of young girls that were 15, 16 years old. And there's this brother that's in the Kingdom Hall that's 20, 21, 22. And the CSA happens, and the young girl is thinking, oh, I can't get this back. I could never get that back. And so maybe I should just marry this person. Right? Because when you're growing up in that culture, you are saving yourself for marriage, right? Well, there went that idea. So in your mind, you're like, well, maybe I should just marry him. But for me, fortunately, that never crossed my mind, because I knew what my dad had gone through. I knew what different people had gone through, getting married at an extremely young age. So I thank God that was the one time growing up in the organization that I stood up for myself. And I said, no. I wasn't strong enough to stand up for myself and say, well, this should have never happened at all. But I was strong enough to say, no, And like I said, it affects that person for the rest of their life. And so, I go on with my life. I go on with my life, and now I'm approaching my senior year, right? So I've gotten over this hurdle, of what's happened to me and other things that had happened to me. And so I get through this hurdle, and now I'm approaching my senior year. And as I talked about in part 1, it gets to a point where if you don't get baptized, then, you start to lose your friends. And at this point, because of the CSA that happened, which is really ironic because I wouldn't have been able to get baptized at that moment if I really wanted to, right? Because now I got this whole judicial situation going on. And in hindsight, I'm looking back and I'm like, I'm the minor. That's the crazy part. I'm the minor. You're not able to get baptized, right? You can get married. You get married to this person, but you can't get baptized. You need to start studying. We need to indoctrinate you more. We need to make sure that you're not going to tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my husband until last year. Imagine that, right? So you grow up and you're having your kids, and you're like, you don't let your kids go anywhere, with other people. You're not trusting your kids with people. You definitely don't let them spend the night over anybody's house. No, you're not spending the night over your friend's house. And they're looking at you like, why are you so overprotective? And you can't tell them, this is what happened to me. This is why I'm overprotective, because this is what happened to me. And so what happens is you just go on with your life, right? So moving into my senior year. So it's my senior year. At this point, I'm still dealing with the craziness in my home, right? When you're a Jehovah's Witness, you have a child, you have no outlets, okay? So I never got a chance to go to any dances, prom. The only thing I was able to do, surprisingly, that they did let me do was grad night. I did do grad night, Disneyland. And so it's my senior year. My parents are arguing. My parents are going at it. And, you know, I don't have an option of going off to the service, right? Because they've pretty much brainwashed me the whole time. In hindsight, I went through a phase where I was like, I should have just signed up for the service. I could have easily got away, right? Then my husband's like, well, then we would have never met. You would have never met me. We wouldn't have our kids. You would have been off somewhere else. So, okay. I accepted the fact that I did not go off to the service. But you don't have any options, right? And because I was in accelerated classes, you know, you're around people that they're doing things with their life. They have, you know, college offers. I wasn't allowed to play sports. That's a whole nother video. Definitely will touch on the importance of your child being, if you are, you know, going to remain in this organization, the importance of getting your child involved in sports and other activities, because nowhere in the Bible does it say that you can't. As you grow up, you realize they don't allow you to do that because they don't want you to be exposed. The whole point is to isolate you so you're not around other kids and other people that say, oh, that's not normal. So it's going to be very important to get your kid involved in those activities because that's what keeps them, you know, out of trouble. So, you know, I got people that I'm going to school with. Everybody's going off to college. Not everybody, but a lot of people are going off to college. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I had the grades to be a lawyer. I had the brain to do it. You know, when I was in the 9th grade, and I'm in school in Cerritos, because even though I lived in Compton, my parents never sent me to school there. So I was reading the same books as the kids in my congregation that were juniors and seniors. So here I am, a freshman, and I'm in the same books that juniors and seniors were in. So I was very advanced. And when I think about it, I start to think about, at this point in my mind, what am I going to do with my life? Right? I've already had this incident in the Kingdom Hall. I'm the minor, and the person, the adult in the situation, gets disfellowshipped. So he gets disfellowshipped because, you know, he did not want to, he became kind of like, I guess you could say kind of like rebellious at that time, right? I can only imagine, like, you know, your family at this point is not talking to you. It just was a lot. It was a lot that was going on. So it's my senior year. So now at this point, I'm 2 years, I'm 18. I'm actually 2 years past this incident. And by then, my grandfather is going back to the Kingdom Hall, and he's going to the Kingdom Hall, and he has his health issues, and you know, didn't really want to go at that point, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep going because we lived on the same property, right? So you know, you plan on not going, and then you know, you get this knock at the door. It's your grandfather, and he's dressed, and you're like, okay. And at that time, you know, my grandfather had, you know, he had just had a stroke. He had so much going. He had started to have a lot of health problems. And so I'm watching my grandfather go back to the Kingdom Hall, and I'm thinking, wow, he was busy. He was working. He had stopped going. And now, you know, he's getting back in. But after the meeting, you know, I'm sitting in the car for hours while my parents are in judicial meetings about all the things that are going on in our house. And so, trigger warning, my senior year, at this point, you know, I'm getting an opportunity to get really closer to my grandfather than I was before, because when I was younger, it was always me and my grandmother. My grandfather worked a lot. He was the sole provider of his home. And so I'm exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to keep going on. School's about to end. I don't want to knock on doors full time. I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. But I'm living in my parents' house, and my father is not going to allow me to continue to live there if I don't keep this up, right? So the house that we were living at, you know, technically it was my grandfather's house, right? So I start having conversations with my grandfather about, you know, me turning 18 soon. And wow, like, if this is what this life is about, because at this time, you got to figure I'm exhausted. I'm going on 4 years of judicial meetings of the stuff that's going on with my parents. I'm exhausted. My dad, at this point, summer of I was 14, about to be 15. He stopped buying me school clothes. So I gotta go get a job, right? So I go get a job at 15 years old, 14 and a half, or 14 touching 15, at McDonald's. So now I am 15 years old. I'm working, and this is in Linwood, right? So if you know anything about Linwood, Compton, you think that they were complying with the child laws and what time how many hours you can work. No, they may have made sure that I got off in time. You know, my mom would pick me up from work, but definitely was allowed to work well over the hours that I should have been working. So at this point, I am trying to keep up with grades as much as I can. I'm going to my counselor, and they can't figure out, because the one thing about being a Jehovah's Witness, you know, what happens in this house stays in this house, right? So you're not talking to your counselor. You're very careful about what you say if you have siblings, because at that time, you're young. I'm thinking, I got to make sure I don't say the wrong thing to have children's services at my house, right? Because I'm the oldest. So, you know, I got to protect my brother and my little sister, who's 5 years plus younger than me, right? So I can't really even be honest and say, hey, stop talking to me about college, because I'm not allowed to go. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your breath. I'm not allowed to go. So I'm working all these hours. I mean, I literally became a manager and I wasn't even 18 years old. I'm running the McDonald's while going to school. I'm getting off at 10 o'clock at night. My mom's picking me up, and I'm getting up the next morning exhausted, falling asleep in class. I'm so exhausted. I was asleep first period and second period towards the end. My junior year, I was asleep first period and second period because I was working, 30 something plus hours a week while in high school. Saturdays, Sundays, gave up my life really, because once you start working and you get a chance of freedom and you're buying your own clothes and you're buying your own toiletries, it gets really hard at home, because at this point your parent isn't really taking care of you. They're providing the roof over your head, but in my case, my grandfather was providing the roof over my head. So I began to really kind of try to sort of open up to my grandfather. But I didn't want to put that stress on him. He had his own health issues. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm about to graduate. I'm about to turn 18. What am I going to do at this point? And trigger warning, I wake up one day and I say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm 17 years old. I don't want to do this anymore. God forgive me, but you see what I'm going through. You see what I've been battling. And like I said, at this point, I'm 18 years in. I wasn't 18 yet, I was 17. So I'm 17 years in, but I'm 3 years and some change into this craziness with my home life. And at this point, I'm just like, this cannot be God's plan for my life. I'm depressed because I really wanted to go to college, right? I got accepted into this gifted school that was 3rd grade through 12th grade. My mom's driving me from Watts as a child to Los Alamitos so I can get this education. I'm in college prep classes. And because I had to work to buy my own school clothes and my toiletries and do what I needed to do for myself, because my dad stopped doing for me because I'm disobedient, because I'm standing up to him for what he's putting our family through, what he's putting my mom through, what he's putting my siblings through. And like I said, and I will say it again, I forgive my dad. Had no idea until years later what he went through with his father, domestically abusing his mom. I had no idea. My grandmother died at 50 years old, from the stress. But that's another video. So I'm 17 years old, and at this point, they're like, okay, you are a junior, you're falling asleep in class. I ended up getting D's in these 2 classes. And so now I got to go make it up. And of course, it's history and science, right? The 2 subjects as a Jehovah's Witness, it's kind of hard to get into those subjects, because if you dig too much into science, you'll start questioning some things, and you don't want to question anything. And then history, that's just a trigger for Armageddon. So I go into the office, and they're like, okay, well, you have an option where you can go to continuation school, make these credits up, come back to your school. So I say, okay. So I go to this continuation school, which I had a lot of friends at that point at that school. And it's crazy how I end up at this school because I was only behind 10 credits. There's no way that in hindsight, there's no way that I should have even got sent to this school, because I was only behind these 2 classes and I was a junior. So, I should have had just been made to go to summer school. But I can't go to summer school because I got to work, right? I got to work. So I can't go to summer school. So I go to the continuation school, and I'm working. They tell me, oh, we have a 0 period. We have, you get all these options where you can go earlier, you can stay later, and you can get additional credit. So I go to the school, and because my school, all of my classes were college prep when I was at my normal high school. So because this school is a continuation school, I just breezed through this work, right? While working at least 30 something, a little less than 40 hours a week, still working at McDonald's. So now I've been working at McDonald's for 2.5 years at this point, while in high school. Can't play a sport, right? I couldn't play a sport, but I'm like, at least if I can do this job, then I can get a break out this house. I can get a break, from my reality. So I go there and I just really push through every piece of extra credit, every opportunity. I'm breezing through it. Sometimes I get home from McDonald's at work, couldn't sleep. I'm just doing extra work. I got to hurry up and I got to get back to my school so I can graduate. So I go to talk to a counselor, right? We get through the first semester, senior year, first semester. Never forget. And I go into the office and I say, okay, I need to talk about going back to the regular high school because I only needed 10 credits. So I sit down with the counselor and they look at all my stuff and they say, wait, you did so much work in one semester that you pretty much finished your senior year in one semester. So they said, well, you have 2 options. They said you could either graduate now. You can finish out this semester, right? In December, you'll graduate, or in January, rather. You'll graduate, and then you'll just come back and walk in June. Or you can go back to your regular high school. But the deal with that is if you choose to go back to your regular high school, you're going to have to take at least English and civics or economics all over again, because it's a state requirement that you have to have that in all 4 years. Like, you have to, I understand that you knocked this out, you're done with this, but we're gonna have to, if you want to go back to your regular school, we're gonna have to use this as elective credit. The extra credits that you got, we'll have to use that as elective credits. You're gonna graduate with more. At the time, you needed 220 credits to graduate, so you're gonna graduate pretty much with 230 credits, 10 credits over. But you have to go back and take English for one semester, which I loved, and you got to go back and take civics or econ. And so I go home and I think about it, and I'm like, why would I go back to my regular school and take these classes all over again just to say that I graduated? I didn't graduate from continuation. I graduated from a regular high school. And what good is it going to make me if I'm not going to college? That realization put me into a deep depression. I'm 17 years old, okay? And I'm in this deep depression. And I'm in a deep depression that nobody is noticing. Nobody at the Kingdom Hall is noticing. My parents aren't no one is noticing because I'm functioning, right? I'm going to school. She's doing great. She's made up these credits. She's working full time. So I wake up one morning and I'm like, I don't want to do this no more. So I find a bottle of pills and I take this bottle of pills. I get through first period, start not feeling so well. Tell the teacher I got to use the bathroom. Get my pass to go to the bathroom. Get in the bathroom, and by the grace of God, I say, I don't want to die. I want to live. And I know my situation is bad, and I know I'm not going to college, and I know I don't have the support that I need, and I'm exhausted because at this point I'm moving into 4 years. 4 years of working while in high school to take care of my needs, to buy myself clothes and to do the things I need to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I will say through the course of those years, my dad at times would feel some type of way, I think, and he would do little things for me. But for the most part, I was taking care of myself. So I pretty much find a girl that's in the bathroom with me, and I'm like, I don't feel good. So anyway, I go into the office. And I'll never forget, it was my civics teacher. Her name was Ms. Ross. And she was amazing. And I go to her and I say, I don't want to die. And she's like, what do you mean? So I give her the leftover pills. Of course, at this point, the paramedics are called. They come out. They rush me to the hospital. I'm assuming at this point my parents are notified. I don't, obviously you don't know, you don't remember everything that's going on. But all I remember was, I remember getting in the paramedics putting me in there. And I remember some friends like, wow, what happened to Cheryl? And I remember waking up in the hospital. And when I woke up, my grandfather was standing over me. He was the first to get to the hospital. And I remember him telling me, saying, I caught the bus because my grandfather had a stroke, so he couldn't drive anymore. And I remember him saying, I caught the bus to come see you. And he was like, why? Why would you do this? And I told him I was tired. I was tired. And the reason why I'm telling the story is because I lived. I got a chance to live. And so, working on the crisis line, there are a lot of people that didn't make it. There's a lot of people that I talked off the ledge, And on the crisis line, you're not allowed to share your personal experience. But I am knowing so many words. I hear you. I see you. And so they give me this charcoal stuff or whatever, because they had to get this stuff out my stomach, and it was gonna hurt to pump my stomach. So they give you this charcoal stuff, you drink it. And my grandfather stayed right there with me while I drank it. And then it makes you throw up. So you throw up all the pills and everything. So then my parents come, and they tell me, at this point, you have to go get evaluated. So fortunately, I was 17 still at the time. So at this point, they put you on the children's side. And I still could not be honest, because I wasn't 18 yet. And even I'll never forget, it was December. And so I was a month shy. But I had my little brother and sister at home. So I still couldn't be honest to why I did what I did and what I was going through, because then I had to worry about, I turned 18. What happened to them? Right? I'm thinking, I don't need my mom, to lose her mind, or, like to have to go through children's services in her home. I have 2 uncles that are on drugs at the time. And so I have a father who is threatening. You have your brothers are on drugs. So, I can easily get the kids. And at this point, at a young age, growing up in the house with manipulation and things like that, I need to stay in this house as long as I can, because I don't want my siblings, I don't want my brother and sister, because the oldest child is a buffer, right? The oldest child is a buffer, and the oldest child can deal with all those things. And if the oldest child can deal with it, then the younger children, they won't have to deal with it as much. But if I leave, then they're going to have to deal with it, right? Because they're up next. So, I'm somewhat honest. They ask me why I did it, and I tell them, I'm a witness. All my friends are, not all of them, but friends are going off to college. I'm not allowed to go to college. So I don't know. I don't know why I'm here. What am I supposed to do at this point? Right? If I stay, I'm gonna be made to go to the Kingdom Hall, because when you turn 18, you don't get the freedom. It's not like, okay, you're 18. No, you still have to go. As long as you are living in your parents' house, because your parents are not going to be able to have privileges unless you go, right? So if you have a father or a mother, and they're pioneering, or your father is a ministerial servant and he's trying to become an elder, or he is an elder, if your child stops going to the Kingdom Hall and you still allow your child to live in that house, you're going to be put down. You're going to be, no, you cannot be an elder. Your household is not in order. And I really think that, I'm not saying my dad wanted to be an elder, but I think there's pressure on the men, right? And I think that pressure gets pushed down to the kids, right? The wife, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and so I can't get to the position that I want to get to, right? Or the kids, they're not doing, what they're supposed to do. So, there's this need to show the elders that it's your wife's fault, that it's your child's fault. You're doing all the things that you're supposed to do, not, but, just to give that impression. So, at this point, they talk to me and they're like, okay, I hear what you're saying. You got a lot going on. And, I promised my grandfather I would never, ever, ever, ever do that again. I would never do anything to take my life, to unalive myself. So, and I meant that. And it's crazy when I, led it in crisis work, I think about that all the time. So just to be very clear, I don't have any type of suicidal ideations. I love my life. I love my kids. I'm just sharing what happened to me as I was growing up as a Jehovah Witness. And the pressure, and you're dealing with things at home, and you're not allowed to talk about it. So pretty much I get released from the hospital. There's nothing wrong with me. Obviously there's something wrong with me, but we just need to, put you in counseling. But once again, you're not allowed to go to counseling as a Jehovah's Witness. You cannot go outside and get outside canceled. You cannot go to see a therapist. My dad had a great job with insurance. I could have gone, but you're not allowed, they don't allow you to do that. They don't want that outside influence. So I turn 18 and I graduate and I get pregnant. Fresh out of high school, right? 18 years old. Have my daughter, who passed away when I was 19. And at this point, my mom and dad, they're done. They're done. My mom is exhausted. So they get a divorce. My father moves out. And I'm like, okay, now I can get a chance to rebuild this life. But now I have to deal with the residual of, my daughter passing away, where my life would be if I would have been allowed to go to college. What am I going to do with my life now, right? I only have 3 years of working at McDonald's, 4 years of working at McDonald's. For 3 years, 3.5, right? Because I turned 18. So I'm making this video for anybody who is still in, and if you're a parent and you're listening to this story, to protect your child's mental. Protect your child's mental. I'm not here to wake anybody up and tell anybody that they should leave the organization. I'm just telling you the truth of protect your child's mental. Your child probably could be very well going through some things that you have no idea. They're too afraid to tell you. They know if they tell you, then you're going to tell the elders, and then next thing you know, they're going to be in the back room with especially if they're a girl, right? Because there's no women in this, on these committees, right? So here I am. I'm a 16. Let's back up. I'm a 14-year-old girl initially in these back rooms with these judicial meetings for 2 years of the crap that my parents was dealing with, and end up in a judicial meeting at 16. That was made to seem to appear that it was my fault, right? I shouldn't have been wearing what I was wearing. I shouldn't have been grown. It really says a lot now that I think back. To here you are, you're 16 years old, and there's something you did to entice this 21-year-old man. And once they make you feel some type of way, you're the Jezebel. You're a 16-year-old Jezebel, right? And this person is 21. It's crazy if you really think about it. Now we're going to skip over the fact of that we've had all these meetings making you feel like you're a Jezebel. And now we're going to turn around and try to convince you to marry this person. So we make the CSA go away by marrying the person. And I thank God that I, in that moment, was strong enough to say, I'm not marrying somebody at 16 years old. Yes, this happened. Yes, I'm embarrassed. Yes, other men in this kingdom hall and other women in this kingdom hall might look at me like I'm used or whatever, right? Because my innocence is taken. But I'm not going to let you convince me, just like I'm not going to let you convince me to get baptized and sign this life-altering contract. I'm not going to let you convince me to marry this man. I don't even know what I would be getting myself into. I don't know this person. Not like that. I can't let an incident cause me to marry this person just to cover it up. In hindsight, it's actually manipulation, right? Because you can't go back. Your innocence cannot be given back to you, right? And so in hindsight, it's like, hey, hurry up and get married so that way you don't look like a Jezebel. And it's not till you grow up and you're a grown woman where you realize, no, you were the victim. And now you're the survivor. If anybody is resonating with this story and you're a young girl and this has happened to you, you can move forward and you can go on to live an amazing life and find a husband and love someone that marry someone that you actually love. And you can go on to have, children. Do not let this situation, if you're in this situation or you had this situation, don't let it define you. Don't let it keep you trapped and have someone dangling something over your head for something that in hindsight you're going to look back and you're going to say, this was done to me, right? Especially if you were a minor. This was done to me. If you are a parent and you're listening to this video, as I said in the first video, I was born in the 70s, so I never once had a situation with any outside this CSA situation of me being 16. I never felt uncomfortable spending the night over anyone's house, and it was a safe haven for me a lot of times because I had too much going on at my house. But after watching the video and realizing I thought I was an isolated situation. I think that's the biggest thing when you wake up and you see the CSA. If you've ever been a victim of CSA, you're like, okay, you really think that you're an isolated situation. And when you watch this Australian Royal Commission, you're like, wait, no, this is a huge problem within the organization. You're not the only person listed in this database of all these stories, because they take extensive notes. They ask very personal questions when you're going through these judicial meetings, right? And unless you have two witnesses, then nothing's going to be done. And in the case of the young girls who might feel like, hey, this is a different type of CSA, right? This is my situation is different. It's not like I'm a 10-year-old and this, 40-year-old man did something to me. This is more of a grooming situation. You really might, you find yourself going back and forth with, am I a victim or I'm not a victim? It's like, no, you are. You are. You're a survivor because you were a minor. You couldn't consent. You couldn't consent. Now, maybe in some states you could have. You got to check your state. But the state that I was living in, definitely 16 years old was not the age of consent. And, once it happened, it just does something to you. You cannot get it back, and you're pretty much, I cannot stress this enough. Do not marry, do not sign the papers for your 15-year-old, for your 16-year-old to get pregnant to a 21, 22, 23-year-old man. It's not okay. So I know this was a lot of information, but I really believe it helped me, and it's going to be helpful to other people. If you are in this situation, you relate to this situation, it will probably help you. Or you might be looking at your kid right now, noticing some things, right? You might be noticing that you're sending your child off to go hang out with this older group of kids at the Kingdom Hall, young adults that are over the age of 18. And the thing about being a witness is, you trust. We trust way too fast. You're taught to trust. Everybody's a friend. No, everybody is not your friend. And when it all goes down, you'll find out real quickly who's your friend and who's not. Do not allow your kids to go hang out with these 19, 20, 21-year-old people in the congregation thinking that they're safe. Because they may not be. They may be being groomed into courting one of those grown men that are in the group. And here you think that you're just, I got to give my kids some type of outside activity, right? They can't do this. They can't do that. Outside bad association. So I'm going to go ahead and let you hang out with this group. It's very common for witnesses to have someone only of either there's this big age difference, which you're probably not going to relate to unless you're like me and I had an old soul as a young kid, so I actually enjoyed studying sometimes with the older women. But they always try to put you with someone that's closer to your age, someone who's already baptized. In my case, I'm being mentored by two people that are over 21, around 21 years old. They're getting married, right? They're getting married. So they're getting married, and I'm being taken on these double dates. These dates. I'm taking on these double dates. How are you double dating at 15? So if you're a witness and you're listening to this video, and I know you're not supposed to, but this is not a pause statement. This is real life. This is what happened. I'm sharing it to help others. I'm healing out loud. It's helping myself. If you are in, please reconsider allowing your 15-year-old to go hang out with older 21, 22-year-old people, co-ed. Because while you thinking that, oh, they're just going to go hang out and go bowling in a group, that's not what's happening. What's happening is they're being groomed, right? Especially, in my case, you're around someone that's 21 years old that's getting married, right? So as a young girl, you're looking at this girl and you're like, you're so lucky. I want to be like that when But then you have this older male that's in the group that starts pursuing you. And as a parent, you just think that your kid is safe with other Jehovah's Witnesses going skating, going wherever, going to the movies, going bowling. When in hindsight, looking back, in my situation, in a lot of people's situation, no, you're being groomed. You're putting your child in a position for an adult male to pursue them. And if something happens, now you're going to be presented with the elders trying to convince your child to get married. The way you can fix this is you can get married. And then you won't be, it's going to look bad for a while. It's going to sting for a little bit. But at least you marry the person. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to drop this video, and there's more videos to come. The first few have been long, right? Because it's a lot to unpack. I plan on unpacking some individual subjects, but, there might be a part 3. I don't know yet. It's just, I don't have any, I'm not writing something down. I'm not taking notes. I don't have a teleprompter right now. I'm just speaking from the heart, right? Everything that I've said in this video, nothing is written down. I do plan on doing more videos where you'll see my face, but I knew these were going to be some tough subjects, right? So coming out and, going on a run or clearing my head as I'm going through this healing process, it just made sense for me to share. And I knew that I could be more vulnerable if I just did it with my voice. I knew that if I did it as an audio, as actual, you're looking at my face. If I did that, I'm going to start crying, breaking down. You're not going to be able to get the full vulnerability, and you're not going to be able to get the full details of what actually happened. I want to thank everybody for listening. If there's anyone in my family that's listening, you may not ever talk to me again because I'm telling my story. I love you, right? And yeah, it's going to hurt to not have a relationship, especially considering I just lost both of my uncles and my cousin. So I'm still grieving that. But I would rather tell my story, get this out, continue to advocate, because this is not going to be the end of it. I will continue to help people heal out loud. I will continue to gravitate and help. I have an amazing group. I just hit, I think, 100 women, that are ex-Jehovah Witness, or they're still in, but they're scared, or they're out, but they need to get mentally out because they're physically out, but they're mentally in. And so, God has really blessed my efforts. No one's going to understand this journey, right? My husband, my kids, my mother, my father, my sister, my brothers. Everybody might be saying, oh my God, there goes Cheryl, embarrassing our family. But guess what? I'm not embarrassed, because I know it's a conversation that I had with God, right? And I know in time, you'll get a chance too to see what comes from this. I only deal with women in the, in my help, in the help that I do, in the services I provide in my group. It's all women, helping us to heal from a misogynistic organization where you were taught that you were less than. And unless you are an ex-Jehovah Witness going through the healing process, or you've already gone through the healing process, you're not going to understand the depths of this. And that's okay. I'm not for everybody, but I'm definitely for a lot of people, a lot of women who share this same experience. A lot of times when people tell these stories, I've had different women tell these stories. My podcast is coming soon. These stories, they start to sound real familiar. There's a pattern, right? And you learn really quickly that, yeah, your story tweaked a little bit, but it gives you peace when you realize you are not the only one that went through this. I will not consider this video of me telling my story of why I left the Jehovah Witnesses as an apostate video. I will not allow the governing body or anybody that's a part of the organization to try to convince me that I'm an apostate. I haven't even talked about doctrine. This is truly what happened to me from being born and raised in this organization. This is me coming out, releasing all the pain from my body and my mind. My husband had to take me to the hospital. My blood pressure was 195 over 95. I called my family and told them, and they were like, take care of yourself. That's what they said. Because, and I forgive them. I don't blame them. They don't understand. They look at it like, oh my God, here she goes. Yeah, here I go telling the truth. Right? I was raised to tell the truth, and so now I'm telling the truth. And in telling the truth, I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but I am trying to heal myself, continue in the healing, and to help others. So if there's anybody that sees this video, message me, reach out to me. Like I said, I only deal with women. I only help women who were born and raised or got into the organization. I don't deal with any men. I'll make that very clear. But if there's any woman out there, I don't talk to children, simply because it's out of respect for the parents. I'm hoping to develop a younger group of women that will be able to chime in and talk to the younger generations, because minors are sticky, and because of my licenses, I am a mandated reporter for children's services, so I don't talk to children because I don't want to have to report anybody, so I don't go there. But if you are over the age of 18 years old and you're a woman and you're struggling, right, and you're having any type of suicidal ideations, you are a product of CSA, you are, in a situation where you need help, then definitely I'm going to put the link to my Facebook group, and join the group where you will not just be me. It will be, several women, and the group is growing really fast. And I know God's going to bless it even more. And it's going to be a lot, and it's a positive group. I want to say that I joined a lot of XJW groups, and a lot of them were very toxic, right? And I get it, through the grief, you go through all the stages, the anger, you're upset, you want to wake everybody up. But where I'm at is I'm at acceptance, and I'm in the healing process of it. And I've done the therapy, right? Continue to do the therapy only once a month now at this point. Because of my line of work, I also have to continue with therapy in order to help other people through this type of deep conversations. But as this group grows, my goal is for it to be a group of women who are on the same mindset of, we are survivors, we are not victims. We meet you where you're at in the process, and it will be a true let's move forward, right? Let's move forward with our lives, because what I have noticed is there's a huge amount of Jehovah Witnesses who are still stuck. 5 years, 6 years, I just woke up and started this healing journey. It's only been a little over a year for me. And I know what I've gone through in this year. But I, have seen videos where women are 10 years in. And I don't want that for you. I definitely don't want to be that. I'm not going to be that. Because that's the way the organization is set up. It's set up to make you be isolated, to lose your family, because God made us to need connection, right? In the Bible, it tells us man should not be alone. God is not just talking about a man. He's saying humans, people. We're not supposed to go through things alone. There is this such thing as co-regulation. Hanging around people and having these uncomfortable conversations, these healing conversations with people, and co-regulating your emotions and your feelings with positive energy, right? So my goal, because I do have an old soul as well, is I pray that I'm able to reach a lot of women who are still 20 years out, still struggling. And I get it. Your mom not talking to you, your dad not talking to you, your siblings, whatever your situation is. In a lot of cases, a lot of these women that I've talked to, their parents have died. They died. At least in my case, my parents are still alive, right? I can continue praying that, this doesn't affect our relationship any more than it has. I will say I am being shunned. They probably would want to call it softly shunned, but no, it's shunned. It's shunned when you get a text message, every so often, I love you, and that's the extent of it. That's shunning. And so I really believe in my heart that this is going to do amazing things for a large number of ex-Jehovah Witness women, that is going to help them get back into, in our group, we're going to talk about exercising, eating right. Yeah, we do tap into the things that happen in the organization and the residual from that, but we don't just focus on that, right? So if you're watching this video, I'm going to go ahead and end it, because trust me, I can talk. Like I said, I don't have a teleprompter right now. I'm literally just talking, sitting in my car, about to go for a run, and just talking. I hope you have an amazing day on purpose. I hope to see you on my Facebook page. I pray that you are able to forgive them, forgive your family. They really, but as Jesus said, forgive them, Lord, for they do not know what they are doing. They really think that by shunning you, that they're helping you. And I pray that they never are in our positions, right? For my family, and I'm going to say it on this video, If you turn 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, and the people that you call your friends, are not there for you, you could always call me. I'm going to always be there for my family, because I know that you don't know what you're doing. You really genuinely think that this is what Jehovah wants you to do. And so I pray that you will have an encounter with God where you will see at some point that there's no fruits of the Spirit, and there's nothing loving about this. It's all set up as manipulation and isolation. That's what shunning is, in order for you to comply, for you to go back, for you to say, oh my God, I got out here and it's horrible out here, right? But I hope you guys all have an amazing day on purpose. Keep your energy up, and I'll see you soon until the next video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And once again, you have an amazing day on purpose. Bye.